My father's will left everything to my sister, even the car I bought him, so I exposed his financial secrets to our entire family. My name is Elliot, and I'm 34 years old. I'd like to tell you about what has been going on with my family lately. It has been a combination of old wounds reopening and new frustrations spilling over. The type of situation in which you keep telling yourself you're over it only to realize you never truly were. My family's favoritism was overt. If you asked my father, Walter, he would most likely deny it, but everyone else knew the truth. Clara, my younger sister, has always been the golden kid. She's 28, intelligent, ambitious, and has somehow managed to check off every box her father has ever wanted. I, on the other hand, could never quite measure up, no matter what I tried. For years I attempted to ignore it, certain that Dad had unrealistic expectations or that my accomplishments were not highlighted enough. But last week, everything became painfully evident. It was your typical Thursday night. Mom prepared dinner, and Dad, Clara, and I sat at the table. We were not close, not really. We had never been the type of family that sat around and shared every detail of their life. It was more of a formality, a weekly check-in in which everyone was physically there but emotionally detached. The talk that night was difficult, as it usually is. Dad was quieter, more restrained than usual. I assumed he was exhausted. Then, while I was telling Clara about a new project at work that I'd been looking forward to for weeks, Dad interrupted with a sharp, frigid voice. "You will never be good enough, Elliot. You simply don't grasp it." He didn't express it as a joke or casual observation. No, it was as if a verdict had been given in front of Mom and Clara, but nobody said anything. I felt my face flush and my hands stiffen. The words hung in the air, thick and oppressive. I wanted to say something, but didn't. A part of me wanted to scream, while another wanted to escape. Clara gave me that strange half-smile, as if she knew this was a ritual for Dad and was almost enjoying the experience. Mom swiftly shifted the subject, and we completed dinner quietly. The next morning, I awoke to an inundation of notifications on my phone. Dad had written a lengthy comment on Facebook praising Clara's huge promotion. She had been elevated to senior director at her firm, which she had undoubtedly worked hard for. But the way Dad worded it made it seem like the entire world was meant to bend down and honor her while I remained invisible. There was a photo of Clara clutching a glass of champagne and smiling as large as you could imagine. Dad's post was filled with compliments, calling her intelligent, diligent, and a shining example of what hard effort can accomplish. It was real in parts, but it primarily felt like a public announcement that she was favored. The fact that there was no mention of me wounded the most. No congratulations, no acknowledgement of my existence, just a bright spotlight on Clara. I sat there scrolling through the comments, friends and relatives all congratulating her and asking when the party would be, and I realized that, even in the eyes of our family and friends, I was the overlooked child. Later in the evening, my phone rang. He said, "Dad, Elliot," in the same tone he uses when making a demand. "We're throwing a celebration party for Clara's promotion. It's going to be at that hall downtown, the one with the chandeliers. I'm expecting you to help cover the cost. $1,500 will be enough." I couldn't believe what I heard. "Do you want me to pay for her party?" I asked in a tense voice. "Yes. She deserves the finest, and it is a family affair. You are a member of this family, hence you are responsible." I took a deep breath. "Dad, I do not fund your favorites." There was a prolonged hush. Then his voice became lower and harsher. "You owe her so much, Elliot. Do not forget it." I hung up before he could say anything further. I spent the rest of the night going over every phrase and memory with Dad. He constantly made me feel like I was a step behind. The way he dismissed my achievements. He lavished Clara with attention and resources, as if she were the only child who cared. I am not naive. I know Clara worked hard to achieve her promotion. But I also understand that this is not about merit or justice. It's about power and favoritism, and my father's unwillingness to view me as anything other than a disappointment. Something inside of me shifted that night. I vowed that I would not let this trend continue, that I would defend myself, even if it meant breaching some unspoken family norms. But then I did something I vowed I would never do. Something that has the potential to either change everything or completely destroy the family. That night, after hanging up with Dad, I sat alone in my apartment long after the lights were turned off. The stillness was far louder than any argument or shout. I continued repeating his rebrices. You will never be good enough. Then came the request for money to fate my sister, as if she were some untouchable queen. I was angry, but mostly fatigued. It wasn't only about the money or the party. It was years of feeling invisible, disregarded, and completely rejected by my own family. The type of rejection that cuts worse than any angry word because it is gradual, steady, and consistent. Dad was always a difficult individual. He worked hard. At least that is what everyone claims. However, his devotion was always contingent on certain conditions. When I was younger, I remember trying so hard to impress him. Excellent grades, athletics, music courses, and even college scholarships. But nothing ever seemed to be enough. Clara breezed through childhood. Dad enjoyed showing her off. In his eyes, she was the perfect daughter, capable of walking on water. I do not blame Clara. She was a child simply trying to live her life. But Dad made it plain from the beginning that she was his success story, and I was just another kid. Every accomplishment I had was either rejected or overlooked. When I got a decent job right out of college, Dad barely looked up. But when Clara received a summer internship, Dad proclaimed it to every family member and friend as if it were a national holiday. Mom, she was different. She adored both of us, but she rarely intervened when Dad got like this. Sometimes I believe she simply didn't know how to fight him. Perhaps she thought this was the way things had to be. Mom's eyes twitched with regret during the dinner where Dad started saying I'd never be good enough, but she said nothing. I later found that she felt constrained, as if she couldn't intervene without worsening the situation. This left me torn between two people who should have been my biggest supporters, but weren't. 2 days following the call, I received an official invitation to Clara's promotion celebration in the mail. It was elaborate gold foil lettering on hefty card material, accompanied by a reservation at an expensive venue with live music, fancy catering, and an open bar. I looked at it for a long time, my stomach twisting. I knew Dad was using this celebration to highlight Clara's accomplishment to everyone, including their friends, colleagues, and neighbors who had watched us grow up. It was a public spectacle, a trophy display, and I was supposed to pay for it. I was not only angry anymore, I felt manipulated. The following day, I called Dad back. Dad, I spoke softly. I'm not sending you any money for the party. There was a lengthy gap. Then his voice became colder, sharper than before. That is disappointing, Elliot. I thought you'd do the right thing for your sister. I'm doing the right thing. I'm not going to bankroll a party where I'm not even acknowledged. Maybe you're not the right son after all. I could hear the hidden threat behind that. The insinuation that if I didn't follow his rules, I'd be kicked out entirely. I informed him, I'm done playing your game. I hesitated whether to tell Clara about it. We had never been close, but I hoped she would understand. After all, she has faced her own challenges. But when I brought it up, she didn't simply dismiss it. She accused me of selfishness. Dad's working so hard to make the celebration perfect. You should be happy for me, Elliot, she replied with a forced smile. I am happy for you, I said, but I'm not satisfied with Dad's behavior or with being made to pay for it when I'm treated as if I don't matter. Clara's eyes narrowed. You simply don't grasp it. You never have. It was obvious she wasn't on my side. At least not in this case. Later that evening, while I was trying to clear my mind, I received a message on my phone from an unknown number. Elliot, this is Bryce. I am Dad's accountant. We're aiming to have everyone's contributions for the celebration completed by Friday. Please let us know whether you plan to send your share. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Even Dad's accountant was involved in this. It felt like a corporate takeover of what was supposed to be a family occasion. I replied, not contributing. Please notify your client. That night, I made a decision that astonished even myself. I began looking through some old family financial paperwork I discovered while cleaning up Mom's attic last year. I had never paid much attention to them before, but now I was seeking for anything that could provide me with leverage or at least some clarification. What I discovered made my mouth drop. There were records of money coming from Dad's accounts, including big sums for firms and investments I'd never heard of. Then there were personal expenses, fancy vacations, a new automobile for Clara, and costly gifts with no receipts or explanations. But there was something more lurking in the files, something I didn't expect. A letter from a lawyer explaining a revised will draft that left practically everything to Clara, with little mention of me. That was when everything changed. After discovering the wrath, I spent the next 2 days in a daze. It felt as if I'd discovered a hidden universe beneath the surface of my family. One based on exclusion and control, not love or fairness. I couldn't sleep or focus at work. Every time I considered phoning Dad or even Clara, my chest clenched with fear. The whole thing felt like a trap, and I wasn't sure whether I wanted to walk into it or run away. One afternoon, I went to coffee with my mother. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could provide answers, or at least sympathy. She looked tireder than usual, as if the weight of the family was also crushing down on her. When I brought up the will, her face turned pale. She sighed deeply and added, "Elliot, your father has been planning this for years. He has always believed that Clara was the one who would carry the family name forward and make a difference." I shook my head. "So what about me? Am I just expected to disappear?" Mom hesitated before calmly admitting, "He has never wanted to see things that way. You were always hard for him to understand. You don't fit into the template that he had anticipated." It hurt more than I imagined. Meanwhile, Dad's messages were more frequent and less subtle. He began texting me, reminding me of our family commitments and the need of publicly and privately supporting Clara. When I ignored them, he called several times every day, occasionally leaving voicemails loaded with thinly veiled disappointment. He even sent me a group mail, with extended family and close friends copied, wondering why I hadn't yet donated to the party fund. I felt exposed and ashamed. The pressure was no longer just about money. It was about maintaining appearances. Dad wanted to project the ideal family image on Facebook, at parties, and in every discussion. And I was the inconvenient reality he desperately wanted to conceal. I contacted Clara again, expecting that things might change now that the will was out in the open. Instead, she returned a scathing reply. "Dad's right about you, Elliot. You don't understand how hard this has been for him. For me, maybe if you weren't so focused on yourself, you'd see that." It was as if she had become a defender of the one thing that was hurting me the most. It felt like betrayal, but I also recognized she was imprisoned in her own way, wanting to hold on to the favor her father had given her, no matter the cost. The celebration was less than a week away, and the family's stress was intolerable. Dad became increasingly distant from me, chilly in his texts, and Clara was preoccupied with party arrangements that excluded me altogether. I received a call from the event coordinator, who had been copied by Dad, inquiring whether I wanted to RSVP or send a present. I told her no. The planner seemed taken aback but courteous. Dad was clearly trying every tool at his disposal to coerce me into compliance, and I was holding firm, albeit barely. One night, while lying awake, I considered who I wanted to be in all of this. The child who passionately desired to belong and be loved by his family, or the adult who refused to be marginalized, neglected, and dominated any longer. I made a choice. I was going to address this directly, not just for me, but to expose the entire unfair, toxic relationship. However, doing so would put everything at jeopardy, including family gatherings, relationships, and possibly even my peace of mind. The days leading up to the party moved at a glacial pace. Every notification on my phone made me nervous. I knew Dad was watching, waiting for me to give in, send the money, and resume my role as the faithful son who paid for his sister's spotlight. But I did not. Instead, I started quietly plotting. I began by accumulating more evidence. Not only did I prepare the will, but I also looked through all of Dad's financial records, hidden transfers, invoices for lavish presents, and even payments to a firm that appeared to be registered in Clara's name but was actually run by Dad. It was a web of money moving behind the scenes, demonstrating how Dad directed his riches and attention solely toward her. I scanned the materials, made copies, and saved them securely. This was going to be my leverage and insurance. I also secretly contacted a family lawyer. I wasn't sure I wanted to launch a legal battle, but I needed some advice, someone neutral who could explain the meaning of these documents and my rights. I stayed at home the night of the party, while the rest of my family and friends gathered in that huge hall downtown. I did not send a gift. I did not attend. I surely did not send a cent. Instead, I tried something else. I sent a carefully worded email, not only to Dad, but also to the extended family, Clara's colleagues, and a few close family friends. In it, I detailed everything I'd discovered, while emphasizing Clara, the financial trail, and most crucially, Dad's habit of favoritism, which had rendered me and others invisible and unsupported for years. I framed it carefully. No allegations, only facts, doubts about fairness, and a need for transparency. I had sinned, pulse beating, knowing there was no turning back. The reactions were quick. Some relatives were shocked, while others were angry, most of which was aimed at me for airing dirty laundry. Clara called me furious and accused me of betrayal. Dad remained silent at first, but the tension was evident. In the days that followed, murmurs and awkward talks circulated among the family. Invitations were returned. The messages went unanswered. Dad's immaculate family image was breaking. But for the first time, I felt strangely relieved. The truth came out dirty and raw. After sending the email, my phone kept buzzing for hours. At first, I didn't have the courage to read any of the comments. I just sat immobile on my couch, staring at the pale glow of my screen as if it was about to catch fire. It was bizarre. For many years, I had waited to be heard. Now that I was here, the silence in my flat was deafening. I was expecting to feel triumphant, but instead felt more like loss, as if I had just buried the last illusion I had about my family. I eventually got up the confidence to read the messages. They are divided into 3 groups. The first group consisted of silent support, a few cousins, and an aunt who reached out discreetly to say they, too, had noticed the partiality, even if they had never expressed it before. Eleanor, a cousin, commented, "I always wondered why your dad treated you like a distant cousin at reunions while Clara got a welcome parade. I'm sorry it took this long for someone to speak up." The second group was silent, a thick, revealing quiet. These were the ones who did not want to take sides, those who preferred quiet holiday feasts and tidy social media photos. I didn't blame them, but I didn't like their impartiality either. Then there was the third group, the defenders. They came in quickly and loudly. One of Dad's old pals emailed me back with a brief reply that said, "I'm not sure what your purpose is, but I recommend you think twice before hurting your own family," as if the family hadn't been slowly crumbling for years. 2 days after the celebration, Clara shared a lengthy note on her social media profile. It started like this: "When people are jealous, they will say anything to bring other people down. I've worked hard for what I've accomplished, and I refuse to let resentment dampen my delight in this moment." She didn't mention my name, but she didn't need to. The message was plain. I was being portrayed as the ungrateful, angry sibling attempting to destroy her special day. Her pals flooded the comments with things like, "So proud of you," "Don't listen to the haters," and "You're a star." A few family members even added their support. I did not respond. I did not have to. A few evenings later, Mom contacted me. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice before she said hello. "Elliot," she replied gently, "I received your email." Her pause after that was extremely long. I assumed the call had dropped. "I should have done something sooner," she finally admitted. "Your father has always had a strong personality. He knows how to make people feel small when they don't conform." I wasn't sure what to say. I wanted to be angry at her for not defending me sooner and for not challenging Dad, but I also knew she lived in his shadow. "Did you see the will?" I asked quietly. "I did," she replied. "It is real." He had it drawn out last spring. He said it was to preserve the family legacy. "When I asked about you," he answered, "Elliot will be fine. He doesn't need anything, like you were a stranger." She was in tears. I never agreed with it, but I was terrified of the consequences if I pushed. It was the first time I heard regret in her voice. I'm filled with deep regret. In the weeks that followed, the family did not implode, but rather cracked. Subtle alterations began to occur. My uncle Graham, Dad's younger brother, called me out of the blue. We hadn't spoken for years. He explained, "Your father's pride has always been an issue, but I had no idea it had gotten this far." We spoke for an hour. He told me stories about their youth, how Dad was always competitive, even with his own brothers. Graham stated, "You're not the first person he's tried to drive out of the circle." It was strange hearing that. For so long, I thought I was alone in this. The black sheep, the outsider. But suddenly I was understanding that maybe Dad had always been the one who built walls. Then one afternoon, I received a hefty packet in the mail with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from Dad, not an apology, but a lecture. He wrote, "You've made your choice, Elliot. I hope it provides you peace because it has caused humiliation to this family. I built what we have through hard labor and effort, and it is not yours to ruin." Then, at the bottom, in smaller, sharper lettering, "Do not contact me further. I will update the will to reflect this choice." There it was, the threat, the line drawn an inch, and yet I felt calm because something had shifted. The roles had changed. I was no longer begging to be seen. I wasn't the quiet, agreeable son, hoping for crumbs of approval. I had pulled back the curtain, and Dad didn't like being seen for who he was. I wasn't done yet. If Dad was going to dig in, so was I. I gathered everything I had, the financial documents, the emails, the copies of the will drafts, and met with the lawyer I had spoken with earlier. We went over everything methodically, constructing a timeline of decisions and patterns, not for a lawsuit, but for clarity. The lawyer said something that remained with me. Even if you never fight this legally, documenting the truth is a type of power that most people in your situation never exercise. And I realized he was right. I wasn't doing this to win a courtroom battle. I was doing it to finally say, without doubt or apology, that what had happened was true and wrong. A week after Dad's letter, I received a brief text from Clara. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a while, unsure what to do. My first reaction was to ignore her. After years of favoritism, a public post that offended Dad, and coldness, she wanted to talk now. But something in me was curious. Maybe I just wanted to see if she'd finally admit what had been going on. Maybe I wanted closure. We met at a park near our old high school. It was quiet, shaded by tall maples, the kind of place where time seemed to slow down. Clara looked different, tired, thinner than I remembered. She didn't waste time. I read everything she said. The will, the documents, the email you sent. I didn't believe it at first, but isn't it all true? I nodded. It is. She looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers together like she used to when we were kids, and she was nervous. "I don't know how I didn't see it," she whispered. "Or maybe I did, but I didn't want to. I thought I had to protect what I'd earned, but now I see. Dad wasn't protecting me. He was using me. It was the first time she'd ever acknowledged the imbalance between us. I didn't say anything and let her talk. He's angry with me now," she continued. "After the party, people started asking questions. He blamed me for not shutting you down, saying I'd let it get out of control, and then he cut off the business funding he promised me. I hadn't expected Dad to turn on her, but of course he had. His love was never love. It was leverage. "I'm sorry, Elliot," she said, finally looking up at me. "I was awful to you. I let him pit us against each other. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it. And for the first time in years, I recognized the girl I remembered. Not the polished adult Dad had molded, but the sister I used to build forts in the backyard." "I believe you," I said. "But that doesn't mean I'm ready to pretend everything's fine." "I know," she said, "but maybe someday." Following that conversation, things began to shift. Quietly but noticeably, word spread throughout the family. It was as if I had re-entered the family, not because I demanded it, but because I had forced everyone to see the truth. Some of the relatives who had initially dismissed me began to check in, and I received a letter from Aunt Diana apologizing for not believing me. I also received an invitation to a cousin's graduation. Dad, on the other hand, went quieter. In public, he maintained his stance, telling people that I had misunderstood the will and that the situation had been blown out of proportion. But in private, his support eroded, and the trust he once held over the family began to crack. Not dramatically, but gradually. He stopped being the man everyone looked to for approval, and that, I believe, was the real beginning of the end of his control. I haven't spoken to Dad since his letter. We're not exactly arranged, just disconnected. I send him a card on holidays, and he occasionally responds with a short, polite note. We exist at a distance, which I'm fine with for the time being. Clara and I are slowly rebuilding. We don't talk very often anymore, but she left the business her father had set up for her and started her own. She says it feels good to build something on her own terms. As for me, I'm fine. I didn't win in a big way, and I wasn't handed anything, but I did find something more important. Clarity. I saw the truth, named it, and stood by it even when no one wanted to hear it, and over time, that truth opened the way for something new. Peace. True peace, not reconciliation with everyone, not a flawless conclusion,